This podcast of the Tailgate Society is sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company. When Rob and Christy Taylor started following the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in 2012, they fell in love with not only bourbon, but the entire distilling process. So they opened Revelton Distillery, where they offer a family of products including vodka, gin, whiskey, and Revelton Shine. Come visit the tasting room at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or pick some up at your local Hy-Vee or Fairway grocery store.
This podcast contains material that is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all listeners. Enjoy.
I don't want to get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can. And we'll all join in to that original sin. So let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Just for the hell of it. Just for the hell of it.
A teacher has two jobs. Fill young minds with knowledge, yes. But more important, give those minds a compass.
Good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of Old Man Strength, a podcast of the Tailgate Society, and brought to you by Revelton Distilling Company, a place where Chris and I will be meeting up very, very soon, and we hope you all will join us there. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing this evening?
We're doing as best as we can, dragging along.
Well, that seems very optimistic and hopeful. I'm glad that you have a cheery disposition on life right now.
It's been a roller coaster the last few days. I've had some health problems the last few nights, not sleeping very well, and this COVID, even though it's been 3.5 months, I'm still suffering a little bit from that. You can hear it in my voice, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But things are going well. You know, can I say? Caitlin's here. She'd drive me crazy. Yesterday, I gave her a whole lesson on how to balance a checkbook. She had no idea about balancing a checkbook, and I had to explain to her why we used to do it and so on. All because we went to the ATM, and I said, there's nothing worse than when you go to the ATM and you punch in the amount you want, and the printer starts to print first before it kicks the money out.
Because you know that means insufficient funds.
Right. I'm trying to take $20 out. My checking account, my checkbook says I had 200, but somehow I can't even take out 20.
Did Caitlin even know what a check was? Maybe we should just back up that far.
We read a check once a month, but she was like, I don't even get the whole balance of checkbook thing. Why would you do that? So I'd have to explain about debits and credits, and you'd have to wait for the bank statement and then mark it all off. And nothing more than a sickening feeling when you got to adjust that and you go, man, I'm off $100 and some.
Well, because it used to take, a week for things to clear. Now, like, if a check doesn't clear and I'm looking online at my online banking and it hasn't cleared within 24 hours, I start to get frustrated, and then I have to remind myself, no, you used to have to wait for like a child to be born and like goats to be sacrificed before they would let a check actually clear. And now it's like, oh man, I just deposited that. Why can't I use those funds right away?
Yeah. What's this partial credit on the deposit I just did?
Yeah. What do you mean available balance? How about you just let me spend my money? I don't know what this means. Right. Well, good. I'm glad she got that life lesson and something that she'll probably never need to use. I hope right after you taught her cursive and,
yes.
And maybe some Latin. I'm kidding. I really do hope that kids learn cursive. I don't know if they're going to teach my kid that. No, though she's in first grade. Now that they teach them in first grade, but it does not seem like I've seen a lick of cursive around the school. So I'm sure that's a dying art.
You're getting a head nod of no from our guest.
Excellent. Well, good. That's probably a really good segue. I didn't even mean to do that, but that worked out well. Because we are going to talk a little bit about teaching in the modern era. And modern era at this point really kind of means the last 2 years, frankly. But Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest for this evening?
Sure. Well, as we were talking about it before we recorded, my wife's a teacher. My daughter is a student teacher. I feel like I've, in the last few months, have went on a defense for teachers in this state. And we have quite a few followers on Twitter that are of the teaching profession. And I reached out to one who has kind of a unique story. She's not only a teacher, she's also a parent of a student athlete from the University of Iowa Hawkeye football team. So even though we're a couple Cyclones, we thought we'd bring in Shelly Kluver. Thanks for coming on and talking to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's always nice to have a mom on here to keep us in line and get us straightened out every once in a while.
Yeah, always a mom.
Right.
I'm always a mom.
No, absolutely. We have been lucky enough to have one or two moms on that has certainly helped to remind us that we call this old man strength. This is just kind of old dad strength at some point. So it's good to have that balanced perspective for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Well, yeah. So teaching, I mentioned I have a first grader, and it's been kind of an interesting year and a half anyway for her. It's been a different life, so I kind of want to get into all of that, but why don't you go ahead and just kind of start off and tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I've taught for 15 years. This is my 15th year teaching fourth grade. I grew up in Marshalltown and then moved to Ankeny. My husband is from Ankeny. We both moved to Texas right out of college, and he was a teacher in Texas. I graduated from Iowa State, ironically, with my first degree. I was always an Iowa State fan, and I graduated with a degree in recreation management. When we moved to Texas, then Texas has, their rules are a little different down there. You can work in the schools. You can be a substitute with 60 hours of any college credit. So I became a substitute down there with just my recreation degree. We moved back up here. I got my elementary ed degree, and I've been there ever since. I subbed for 7 years, and now this is my 15th year in fourth grade. And my husband teaches middle school at the moment. This is his 31st year, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So
we're out in Texas. We're out in Texas.
We were in Houston. So we were at North Shore. Which was a powerhouse for football. Yeah. That's a different learning experience down there. It was right out of college. We had a great time. And we're just huge sports people. So it was wonderful. And then
my wife's student taught there in Houston.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. I'll have to ask her where at.
Yeah. We had a good time down there. Met some of our best friends, but yeah, when one of your class periods is whatever sport you play, it's yeah. So I got pregnant with Tyler, and we came back up here, and we've been in Marshalltown. We teach there. We live in Ankeny now. So we've been in the school system for a long time.
Wow. Okay. And you said your husband is middle school. So is there a particular subject that he teaches?
Yeah, he teaches PE.
Oh, nice.
So he was at the high school in Marshalltown for several years, and then he was moved to the middle school. And so I think this is his 27th year in Marshalltown, or somewhere around in there. So he teaches PE and sees some of the same things that I see every day.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So not to steal your thunder, but I did have a question, just because your husband does teach PE, and it made me immediately think about trying to do distance learning PE with my daughter. Her physical education teacher had to get pretty darn creative on how to be able to do that. Yep.
When we were virtual, of course I was up here and he was downstairs, and then I would have a break, and I would, and they did get creative, and he would have them all get up on the Zoom, and he would time them with a timer. And he'd watch them as they were doing their activities, and then he'd stop and they'd take their heart rate and whatever, obviously you can't play volleyball on virtual, but you have to be very creative with. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter did a lot of kicking a ball of socks around the basement, around a water bottle over to another water bottle, those types of very creative things for sure.
Well, and Tim, your daughter probably doesn't know any different than what she's been a part of.
Thankfully. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
This pandemic is all she's known.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
which has made it like really easy, for sure. Compared to some of my friends with older, like, I don't want to say really easy, right? I mean, there was certainly
right. Oh, sure.
Right. But compared to my friends with older kids, since I started a family later in life, most of my friends have, teenage kids, and they had a very different perspective on all of this.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, I think it's, for her, I think in a way it's kind of good because this is all she knows. And so she's going through the hard part now. Hopefully we'll get into the easier part as she gets older. Whereas the kids that I have who are in fourth grade, this is their third year of dealing with this. And it's taken a toll on everyone. Sure. So
we talked about that with Caitlin in her student teaching, that starting teaching in this environment is actually, as crazy as it sounds, probably a little beneficial rather than somebody that has to pivot and learn technology and so on and so forth, who probably hasn't had to do that during their teaching career. She's pretty tech savvy and can do that. And she's noticed that quite a bit that some of the teachers, even in the last few weeks, have pulled her aside and said, hey, can you show me this? Can you build this? Can you do that? So I think it's been beneficial, as much as she probably doesn't see it at the moment,
right?
Because she's frustrated, that, it'll benefit her in the long run.
She'll learn a lot. I had a student teacher in the fall from UNI, and he in the middle of a pandemic, he's learning a whole bunch. And he was thankful that he learned what he did. So I think it's great. She's going to come out better on the other end because of it. She may not feel that way now.
Yeah, I was going to say she's probably incredibly, especially because she started out college not knowing she was going to jump into teaching in the middle of this nonsense, right?
Yep.
But
along with everything else, Ruby Reed Intermediate. That's where my wife taught in Houston.
What was it again?
Ruby Reed Intermediate.
Doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah. So,
but Houston's big. So.
Right. Yeah. It's not Des Moines.
Yeah. No. Isn't it like the third largest city in the country? So huge. Yeah.
Huge.
That's like when somebody asked if you went to Iowa State and they'd say, "Oh, do you know so and so?" Yeah. There's only 45,000 people there. So,
yeah, no, I literally had that this weekend. Someone's like, "Oh, let me show you pictures of my friends that went to Iowa State like the same time as you." And I'm like, "Yeah, and 30,000 other people."
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
No, I get it. But so fourth grade, you said, you've got students that are on their third year of this, but they also don't. It's not like they've spent years and years in the system before, right? So
right.
There has to be a certain amount of kind of pliability, I guess, with them, right? Or
sure.
Or are they just exhausted in general?
Both. It is when Chris and I talked about this and me coming on, I thought about what is the hardest thing for me right now, or what's the hardest thing for the kids. And amazingly, you can have a kid in kindergarten, first, second grade, and preschool. A lot of them went to preschool. And so you've got 3 or 4 years where they've been in a school system. And then in a year or a year and a half, they lose not the academics. I absolutely don't worry about the academics, but they've lost how to self-regulate themselves.
Oh, sure.
They've lost their social awareness. And they've lost their ability to be independent thinkers in just that little bit of time. Now, not everybody, and not all of, and not every single one of them lacks all of that. But those are the 3 things that I see on a daily basis. They were at home. I have students that were at home all of third grade. So for a year, you're at home doing virtual, and then boom, you're put back into a classroom. The rules are different at home.
Yeah.
A lot
And
different.
there's one or two of you, three of you, maybe there's a parent, there's somebody there. Now you're back in a group of 24, 25, and you can't talk all the time.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
you have to problem solve. If it's just there's a lot. And so I don't even bring up the academics.
Mhm.
All this other stuff is what I spend my day doing, helping to self-regulate, making them aware of being aware of other people, being aware of adults, being aware of what comes out of your mouth, and then just being independent thinkers.
Yeah, I mean, now that you say that, I guess I really think about like 3rd and 4th grade is really where you kind of learn like the value in independent work, but also in group work and the dynamics between the two of them, like where you really start to develop, because now it's not about every kid necessarily doing the exact same activity, or it's about going, like I think about, you know, seeing my nieces and nephews go through this, or if I can remember back when I was in 3rd grade and going through all of that. But it really is, that's really kind of when you're developing those skills where you have to be around other kids in order to really develop that and be around adults that aren't your parents or your grandparents.
Yep. And they don't all like each other all the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so when you're home for a year, or when you're in and out, and I'm home and then I'm back in school and then I'm home and last year we had such intense protocol that we basically sat in our desks from 8:20 to 3:20. We still eat in our classrooms. We eat breakfast in our classrooms. Last year we did specials in our classrooms. So now they've got, you're right, they learn that the kids kind of start to be like, okay, this is where I am in reading, this is where I am in math. I got to work with this group, I have to work with this group, and that the struggle is really tough for them. And they'll just tell you flat out. And that's where that social awareness comes in. As you got to remember, you got other peers in this classroom, and you don't just say whatever you think like you do when you're at home. So,
yeah, I was thinking structure is probably a big thing too. Being a year at home and just having the free will to get up and walk away from their computer or turning their camera off. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would go upstairs to get some water or something when I was working, and my wife's teaching from the kitchen, and I can hear her say, you know, Jimmy, you need to turn your camera on, or so-and-so's in a Teams room and they shouldn't be in this room. You're not in this class today. I mean, there's no control to keep them in there or keep them on task or what have you. So the structure that they needed to have was probably just as important.
Yeah. Yes.
I think what I'd like to ask is let's go back and talk about independent thinking, because I think when people hear that, some people might think that means something else, but you're talking specifically not asking, not looking over, or not getting together with their neighbor or whatever, and getting help from them, because I'm sure that probably happened a lot at home, right?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mean it academically either. I'm not even talking, I'm just talking problem solving. So my pencil's broken. And even though Mrs. Kluver has said over and over and over, here's what you do if your pencil breaks, they still will sit there and they'll raise their hand, or they'll just yell out, Mrs. Kluver, my pencil's broken. That simple problem solving, independent thinking escapes many still. And I don't even think about academics, because people worried so much about, we're going to be behind, they're going to be behind. We'll be good. We'll be good. We're working really hard with them academically. But I always tell my kids at the beginning of the year, when you walk out of my classroom, you're going to learn academically, but I need you to be a better person. All this stuff that I just said is what makes you a better person. And that problem solving.
Which is what I think needs to be expanded on as far as a conversation goes, because I think that is something that some parents and some people in the community don't realize that you guys do in those classrooms. You're not just teaching, you know, arithmetic and history and whatever. It's social skills, it's adaptation, it's protocol, the independent thinking or whatever. And I think that, I mean, if we're going to dive right into it, I think some of the narrative out there is that that's being twisted, that some of those things are bad.
Right. I would agree with you. And so we have what's called a morning meeting, and a lot of schools have gone to this. I don't know if your wife does or not, but we started this several years ago, and I wish we'd have done it when I first started. And so we do what's SEL, which is social emotional learning, and it all pertains to everything I just talked to. And there's 5 state competencies that we go by, and it is some of this: self-regulate, social awareness, individual awareness. And so every week we've got a different SEL that we teach. And I'm not sure parents are aware that that goes on. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when Tyler was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they weren't doing morning meetings. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there was a need for it. Things have changed so much.
Oh, sure.
In the pandemic, yes, but even in the last 5 to 10 years, things have changed. And so there's a lot of kids that don't have the support at home, academically, emotionally, socially. So we do a lot more of that than people realize.
I mean, so like when Chris and I were growing up, we didn't even have the things like character education that developed over the last 20 years, right? Some of those things that I think are certainly crucial in the way that, my daughter speaks about her classmates is that everyone's a friend. And like there was supposed to be a new student that was supposed to start the first day of the second semester and didn't start because they didn't get into town or whatever. And she was talking about how she would, like, every day when I pick her up from school, we talk about, what made her happy, what made her sad, what made her scared, what made her, frustrated. We talk through each one of those things. And one thing that made her sad was that she didn't get to meet her new friend today. Yep. And that's the way she talks about that in first grade. But that goes back to kind of that character education piece that I don't think, Chris and I didn't have any. I mean, we were told to, be nice to each other, but we didn't have those types of things in our curriculum that I think that you've seen. And so then, I think what you've said developed within the last 5 years has been an extension of that, right? Like it's really more about understanding that it's not, you're never going to be successful with a student academically if you can't get them to connect with their peers and to express themselves in an emotionally secure way, or to be able to articulate what their struggles are, right?
Yes, and that comes back, and that comes back to the foundation for me is relationships. Mm-hmm. If you can't develop relationships with your kids and set that foundation of connecting with them, nothing to do with academics, then it's going to be really hard to get to them academically if you don't have that relationship. And some kids are tough to connect with these days. Some are really tough to connect with. So, and that's just another thing that goes with it. I think that we've seen a lot in my experience. There's a lot of trauma that's gone on. And it can be anything, social, emotional. And that's kind of why we've put in some of these things that we have that talk about this, because they don't have anybody to talk to at home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed last year a lot. Was I would go upstairs and it began to, even though I've been married to her for 10, 11 years, 12, something like that. It's 11.
You better get that right, Chris.
We've established she doesn't listen to this podcast. She just went upstairs.
I was going to say, speaking of how like emotional intelligence might be a little bit more important than academics.
But it's one thing that struck me is that it never dawned on me that she at that point was doing 3 different jobs. She was being a teacher. Mm-hmm. She was being a social worker, because she works in a school that is 100%, free and reduced lunch, which should tell you the income level of that school, and technical support.
Yep.
All juggling that. And now that she's been back to school, the social aspect of it has been even more. I mean,
yes,
she goes to a certain apartment building that has the majority of her kids. She's English as a second language teacher, so
Yep.
she deals a lot with the immigrant kids
Yeah.
and so on, which are some of the poorest.
Yep.
I mean, even last night she was talking about how one of the little girls was telling her that it's just been really hard because they don't have her and her sister don't have a bed to sleep on.
Yep.
And they're sleeping on the floor every night.
Yep.
So we've arranged to get them a few beds from some friends that have some extras or whatever. But those are things that a lot of people don't realize, and that they're doing those types of jobs as well. I mean, she goes and picks up bread, and they have a food bank at that school. Those are all jobs, and those are all programs at that school that when you start talking about in this state about cutting funding and things like that, especially for the party that claims to own the moral high ground,
Right.
you're taking food right out of little kids' mouths.
Absolutely. And people don't realize that, Chris, with the money that was given, we have a food pantry, this caring closet that I'm trying to get started at our school. If you can't sleep at night because you don't have a bed, if you don't have the clothing that you need, it's very tough to come to school the next day. And then for people to say, why aren't they proficient? Why aren't they where they're supposed to be academically? Well, go sleep on a floor and then get up and wear the same clothes that you wore yesterday. Don't eat breakfast, don't eat anything. And then you go to your job and see how well you do that day.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I guess if you're not in it, you don't realize it. It's like you said, you would go up and see her doing those things. We do the same things. The struggle I have is I'm not a trained, social worker.
Yeah.
I'm not a trained mental health provider. I have a lot of training in a lot of things. Those are not it. And we do not have enough of those people.
My mom, growing up, taught in a 100% at-risk funded program. Mm-hmm. So she had to do home visits even.
Yeah.
And so I watched how much of her own money and unaccounted for time and to go to not only spend in lesson planning, but to care about those students and to plan for everything that beyond her curriculum. So she could plan a curriculum for tomorrow, but then that was another several hours of planning all the contingency plans she had to deal with. Yep. Even down to just the sheer emotional toll it takes on you for all of that. And so I know that with my mom, but in a sense, my mom signed up for that in that program. Yeah. But then when I see my kid in a fairly affluent school district, but it's still a very diverse school district, and I see the notes of these teachers that are still begging for hats and gloves and mittens and making sure that people are wearing, like kids are wearing appropriate winter clothes to school, and that they still need help with this and this and this in the classroom, which should be some pretty, in my opinion, some fairly basic things, right?
Yes.
That's where it hits home for me more. Not what my mom went through, which was extreme but expected. It's that even in your most affluent, just because it's affluent doesn't mean that there's not other areas. And I think sometimes it's easy for people in communities where all they know is their friend
having what they need,
their kids and their friends' kids, and everyone's all taken care of, right?
Yep.
They don't understand that it's an impediment to you being able to do your job when you have all this other bullshit to deal with.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's not funny, but it doesn't leave you. Mm-hmm. You leave at 4:00 or 4:30 or 5 or however long you're there after school, and it just doesn't leave you. You're thinking about, okay, what do I got to do with this? What do I have to do with this? And like I said, the academics, I can do that. I can do academics anytime. give me a lesson, give me a topic, I'll create a lesson for it. But you are hit with so many different social emotional things that you just have to deal with, because I'm not going to get trained in social work. I'm not going to be trained in mental health. I'm just not. So then I do the best I can, and it doesn't leave you. And there are students that never leave you.
And 19 out of 20 kids or 20 out of 30 kids could be perfect. And you've got one kid that's a disruption, and that causes everything to go chaotic. And schools are, I mean, like, they're notoriously really good at like finding those kids. And no, like, it's not, it always happens where you're always going to have something that you're going to have to deal with, and administrators don't recognize that it's a bigger deal than it is, not because they don't care, but just because, shoot, every teacher in their school is dealing with a kid like that.
Everybody right? is. I have nieces and nephews that go here in Ankeny. They're not just in my school. Yeah. My daughter-in-law teaches in Des Moines. She teaches at Greenwood, over by that feeds into Roosevelt, I guess. And she teaches special ed there. It's every school. Yeah. And the pandemic has just magnified that. So. Yeah. So you've got all of that. And now add in, Chris mentioned technical support, and I don't want to miss over that. Because we had talked about your husband doing virtual PE. What I have come to really appreciate about my daughter's teachers last year and this year is no one knows how to operate the online learning platform the same way. No teacher is doing it the exact same way. If the teachers can't agree on how to do it, how do they expect parents with any wide array of technical ability to do that? And how do you get, fourth graders are probably more technically savvy than I am, but they're still not able to troubleshoot some of these problems that are going on. And so now these teachers are left, because there's one tech guy for the entire school. There's not enough to go around for everything that's going on. And even that, when we went virtual, when the school stopped in March of 20 and we did virtual, I was scared to death. I mean, I'm fairly good with just the basics, and I have learned a lot, and I can teach myself a lot. But I thought, I can stand in front of 25 kids in the front of the classroom, no problem. But on a computer, how do I manage 25 kids on a computer? I had no idea.
Well, even Chris, even Caitlin, coming fresh out of college, should be the one most ready for this, and I'm sure that would still scare her shitless.
It would, and she struggled even being on the other end of it when Iowa State sent everybody home and they had to do virtual. Yeah. And a lot of her classes, even last year, in 2021, were still virtual, and she said it was the hardest thing to do, because I don't have the opportunity to walk up to my professor and get a clarification, or ask this or ask that, or lean next to the person in class next to me and say, hey, do you want to go over this together or whatever? She goes, I was all on my own. She said, and I'm paying the same amount of money, and the stress level is even worse. Yep. She really had a tough time with that.
And 20-year-old kids, my youngest is in his final semester at Iowa, and he's the same way. He's not an online learner. One of my middle kid would be, but you're talking about 22-year-old kids. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of younger teammates that I work with that they went to UNI that were very good with technical skills. I was always trying to get a hold of them and say, how do I do this? How do I record? How do I, like I said, I've learned a lot, but that was another factor that people don't understand. School stopped.
Well, I'm sure.
And we had a week to get ready.
Yeah, and I'm sure it probably was frustrating on your end to, you felt like you were bothering them too. I know that's what it's like. I started a new job in August. We're 100% remote. It's a hell of a lot easier when you're in an office and I can turn around and ask so-and-so, hey, I got this error message. I'm not quite sure what this is, rather than now I have to ping them, wait for them to get some time, hop on a call, I mean, it's so much more work, and you know that they're working and they're trying to get their stuff done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's even tougher, I think.
It is. That was another added, and my husband, who is old school, and he doesn't want to text. He doesn't want to be on a computer. He wants to phone. He wants to talk to you. He doesn't want an email. He doesn't want to learn any of that stuff. So he was really frustrated, and he did a really good job.
But like the 24-year-olds that can help them don't even want to talk on the phone. They would prefer if you.
No, exactly. They don't want. And exactly. So you've got an old school PE, mind you. And so he did amazing, because that was tough. But that was just another part of what we've had to learn.
I do find that fascinating that he was able to do that. The boys that I have, both are special needs. They were in special ed, and when they first sent them home, they had nothing for them. I mean, they had their Chromebooks, but they literally, it was log into Google Classroom, talk to their teachers a little bit, and then their teacher would give them daily chores around the house that they would need to do to help learn chores or whatever, and learn social skills. But that was it. I mean, they were really set back.
That's tough. Yeah.
And they were done. And I'm working. My wife was working, so it's not like we had time to sit down with them and make them, which is no different than any other parent, I'm sure,
Right.
But I mean, they were done within an hour, and then they were in their rooms on their phones all day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and when we went virtual that spring, we had he has 7 periods in a day, or now they're blocks, but the kids would have to follow their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like they would have to go to math at this time, and PE at this time, and science at this time, and they followed that entire schedule to finish the year.
Which is weird too, when you don't have like all the breath in between things. Kids can very easily get disengaged, like right? I mean, like it's one thing when you're like, okay, I just finished this and I have to go after this, but now it's like I just finished this and I got 10 minutes to dick around in my room, and now all of a sudden I'm disengaged. Like
and now maybe I won't log into science.
Yeah. Or if I do, I'm already thinking about something else. Yeah.
Or I'll turn my camera off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you from a corporate perspective, there's nothing more tiring than sitting at a desk on camera in meetings back to back to back. I mean, you're not engaging in anything else. You're doing a lot of listening, you're conversing, but it's very hard to do.
Which is why I left corporate America and got into brewing, because I hated being in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting and feeling like I was getting nothing done over the day.
Right.
And so I would not want to put an 8-year-old or a 14-year-old or any age through that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Very difficult.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I understand if maybe this is an area where you will tread lightly, but I think one thing that's frustrated me as a parent is seeing other parents, or maybe even other people within the school district that don't actually have kids there, that really want to express an opinion on how kids should be taught. And like, don't get me wrong, I have my opinions. I don't agree with everything that my kid's school does, or the district does, or whatever, but that comes from being, the brother of a teacher and the son of 2 teachers, and like having that in there. Like, I don't, when I get frustrated by things, I have multiple people I go to say, am I crazy? This is bad, or whatever. Right. But it seems like, whether it be anything from seeing a dad of my kid's classmate get mad about masks while his son is happily sitting there wearing a mask, like, this isn't a big deal. Like, his kid cares about it less than his dad does, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's masks, or whether that's certain subjects being taught, or whatever, it sure seems like there's PTAs haven't gotten any more funding, but there sure seem to be an awful lot of parents with opinions on teachers lately.
And I think the frustrating part that I have had is I think everything went political. Everything went politicized. And I don't, that's not how I see it. I don't see it from the right or the left or whatever you want to be. I just see it from a human and from a teacher's standpoint. And you are right. The kids did amazing last year. We had shields our kids sat behind. And I talked all the time about, we're in something that we don't like. We all know that. The masks we talk a lot about something that you were expected to do. So if you're expected to come in and sit down and listen, we come in and we sit down and listen. If you're expected to come in and wear a mask, we're going to wear a mask. And that's just the way I approach my classroom. This is your expectations. And that's not how the world went. The world didn't go that way when all this happened. The world went, this is how I feel, and this is how it should be. And I'm right. And that's the way it should be.
A lot of individual liberty at the expense of a collective good.
Exactly.
Well, a lot of them seem to forget that in any job, if I go work for the company that I go work for, I have expectations that I have to meet.
Right.
I can't go to a corporate office and wear shorts and a tank top to work every day. There's certain expectations. I can't just decide that I want to go in and work half a day. I can't do any of those things.
Right.
And for these people that don't grasp that or are starting to splinter off from that, I just don't understand that. It doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I do think that's part of the reason why in the last few weeks, I feel like I've just ramped up more of my defense of when it comes to teachers and schools and school boards and administrators, because I think there seems to be an assault there that I've said a few times, everybody knows that school board elections are probably the least participated election there is. You might have 1 or 2% of the electoral amount that goes and votes in that, but the amount of damage that can be done by not paying attention to those races, especially now, is dangerous.
Yes.
If you want to be involved in your kids' education in your kids' schools, there's always been ample opportunity for you to do that.
Yes.
It's called parent-teacher conferences. It's called PTO.
The thing that is frustrating for me is those parents that, and I'm not saying any specific school, the parents that aren't there to support the homework, aren't there to support with the social emotional, but yet have the opinion of, but this is not what you should be doing in that school.
Right.
Yes.
So I can support you over here, but I'm not going to support you over here. It doesn't go that way.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. And Chris, you're right. I would talk to my kids about from 8:20 to 3:20. These are the expectations. When you leave my classroom, there might be different for you. But when I walk in this classroom, my principal has expectations of me. I need to be ready for you. I cannot wear we have a dress code. And so I tried to explain it that way. And I still talk about that, that we all have, no matter what you do, whether you're a mechanic, whether you work at Walmart, whether you work as a teacher or a doctor, you just can't do what you want.
Yeah.
You have to do what's expected. Otherwise, work for yourself and where you make your own rules.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the way I feel about education. So my sister was a teacher for a long time, and when she had kids, then she homeschooled her kids. She actually got them in a homeschool co-op so that they were still socialized and working with other homeschoolers, but under her own kind of what she expected them to learn and to focus on. And I was like, great, do it. When I hear all these parents that are like, oh, that's an indoctrination center, but it absolutely has to stay open, I'm like, well, no, you can't have it. Like you're angry. Oh, public schools are terrible, but I need them there for my kid. I'm like, well, no, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth there.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
It's the same parents I see in my kids' class that aren't engaged, and why when they are distance learning, those kids are the ones that have the most computer problems or the most disengaged, but they're also the ones that get so angry about it all. I'm like, you can't do this
Right.
both ways. If we're going to find value in sending our kids to school, you're not a babysitter.
No.
Right.
No.
That's it. And I think that's the problem. There's too many parents have turned it into, well,
Mhm.
this is what I do with my kid during the day.
Right. And then do with them what I want you to do with them.
Yeah.
There's a sense of entitlement, I think.
Yes.
Right.
In that's your job. You're going to do it. I'm a taxpayer. I have a right to say what you're going to do, and you're going to do that. There's no compromise on their end.
No,
That's
no.
part of the problem.
No.
I mean, it's a pretty hot topic now as far as cameras in the classroom. I had an entire argument. I do have a job. I actually do work all day long. But I had an entire conversation with several people yesterday about this because I think I've gone back and forth on the issue. I think the majority of the teachers probably wouldn't have a problem with a camera in their room because it might teach some parents what their kids are doing all day long and how they act.
True.
But and I think it may protect the parents or the teachers as well.
Yeah.
As far as what's happened in the classroom. No, I told you, little Timmy has been doing this for months now. You never believed me. So this was a result of that action, things like that. I think what the problem is that as I put it yesterday to a guy, I said, so how would you like it if he said, well, I have cameras in my office and I have cameras in my workplace. Okay. But does your customer have the ability to go into your work and say, I want John fired because I don't think he did his job well enough? No, that business has their own rules and their own practices and their own expectations, and those cameras will be used. And then if you don't meet their expectations, then there'll be consequences. Not Joe Schmo who happens to be a customer. That's not how that works.
Right.
And parents are the same way. Parents are a byproduct and a customer of that system.
Yeah.
To have some dude, some random guy that has never served in the classroom and doesn't have any idea what you guys do all day long and has not had the training to then go in there and say, well, I don't like the way Mrs. Kluver handled that history lesson, so she should be reprimanded, is outrageous. That's outrageous. And for them to that's where I have a problem with it, is when they're coming from this whole sinister agenda indoctrination.
Yeah.
Listen,
well, it's terrible for
that time to have a planning period most of the day. You think she's sitting here planning to take over the world by trying to figure out how to manipulate 7-year-old kids?
Yeah, I can tell you from the restaurant industry, the restaurant managers who are sitting watching security cameras and calling in or checking all the data and calling in and reprimanding bartenders on the spot for overpouring a beer or stuff like that, the morale is incredibly low. And that's from the manager, right?
Yeah.
Like if your principal were over your shoulder all day long, you would hate it. Now to have random, why would any teacher want to teach in that environment? Especially because there's going to be however many students you have. Yeah. There's at least that many opinions from parents, if not twice, because each parent doesn't agree.
Yeah. And I see, or I have kind of an opinion on both sides of, okay, you want some cameras? I'm not sure you would want some after you saw some of your children. Mm-hmm. And I welcome anyone into my classroom. My superintendent, he will pop in and come in and talk with it. I'm not doing anything there that I'm not expected to do. Yeah. That if my principal walked in, he would say, Shelly, what's going on here? I'm not doing anything like that. Yeah. So I don't know what they're wanting to see. Now I will tell you that there are cameras outside our building. But the only person that has access to that, if something goes on or if something's happening before school starts or after, is the principal. There are cameras where my husband is at, and it has helped him and saved him a couple times because he's been accused of something and it wasn't there. Just they've been, and so now granted, he's in a gym that's huge,
Right.
and the cameras are, you can't really see faces, and the public isn't looking at it. But there is, I think some of the parents better just be like, okay, maybe we don't want that to happen, to see exactly what some of them do.
Well, and like, I'm not even thinking about it like with, because I think, some people, and I think maybe rightfully so, say, hey, these are public servants paid by taxpayer dollars. I should get to see that, right? Like, I certainly am pro police body camera, right? Like, because I want accountability, but I shouldn't be watching that in real time, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't after the end of every day watch what they did. It should come up if there's an incident that we should be able to see that. So, like, I guess I get that argument. It just seems to me that between what it does for morale and also what I know about observation bias, both from teachers and from students, when you're being watched, you act differently, and that doesn't mean better or worse. It changes performance. It changes student performance.
Yes.
Right. I mean, one thing I've always hated about the corporate world is that we punish introverts and we praise extroverts.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that extroverts are better performers or introverts are worse performers, but we think they are. Like, even like in non-customer facing roles, we talk, like, I had a job that didn't face any customer, and my boss did not like one of my employees because he was introverted and was like uncomfortable to talk to him. Like, I don't give a shit. He's not turning anyone off. He's a high performer. You just don't like him because he doesn't say hi to you in the morning.
Right.
I was just going to say, is he doing his job? Then...
Yeah. Right. But if I'm a kid and I'm already uncomfortable and now I know I'm being watched, I'm going to perform even worse.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, stage fright's a real thing. Every single one of us, and I was a theater major, and I will tell you, I've experienced stage fright. We've all experienced stage fright. Now imagine that's a crippling anxiety that you have, and your parents are watching at home.
Yeah. And can you imagine? I can see my kids would just focus on wherever that was. Yeah. I can just see them all day long looking up there, or wherever that was put, just like, I mean, we have enough that takes their focus off as it is.
Yeah.
Let alone that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, well, we won't show the students. I'm like, yeah, but you have to call on students in class so everyone knows who's answering. Like, there's just not a way to edit that in real time.
No.
Certainly not a cost efficient way for everyone who seems to be wanting this. They sure also seem to be small government spending. Don't seem to understand. Again, you teachers have to troubleshoot tablets that go home with kids. How the hell are you going to troubleshoot all this technology in the classroom?
Yeah, I have enough time just with my microphone. Like, when we went last year, we just tried to stay. The desks were 6 feet apart, so the district bought all of us microphones to wear because we have pretty big classrooms, and they wanted us to kind of stay up front. So we have microphones. Well, I can't walk in a certain part of my classroom without it just going, just screeching.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the kids are just like, and I'm just teaching. All of a sudden I walk down a row, and they're like, Mrs. Kluver. And I'm like, sorry. I have a hard enough time with that.
Yeah.
Trying to control that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why when we built schools 20 and 50 and 100 years ago that we didn't think about performance level acoustics.
And if we have that kind of funding laying around, I could think of a lot better things to spend it on than cameras.
Right. Yeah. Seriously.
I was just talking to my colleagues today, and I said, in my opinion, I think that 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th is the toughest grades right now. Middle school is tough. And I think that our 4th graders now are what 6th grade used to be. Physically, they've developed a lot more. We have a couple 4th graders as tall as me. I'm 5'6", but they're 4th graders. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough age group right now. It's tough anyway. And then you throw all this lack of self-regulation, social awareness, all that in there. And if you were going to spend any money, and that's where I was going with this, if you were going to put any more money into schools, I think 5th through 8th for social workers, more counselors, more support, just somebody to talk to. Right. I think you've got to plug that age group, because that's tough.
I certainly think one of the nicest things that's come out of the last 10 years is that people are more cognizant of mental health than I think ever before. But I can tell you that it's hard enough for me to find a counselor within my healthcare network for me or my daughter. I'm grateful that the school district has someone that my daughter can talk to. It certainly wasn't anything that I had. I mean, we had a counselor, but the counselor, that wasn't what their job was, right? No. I mean, traditionally we think of high school counselors as who helps you apply to college. Like that. Yeah, that's not anything near what they should be doing. Those are entirely different roles. That's not what they went to school to do, and that's not what people need. But yeah, that requires a lot more resources that a lot of people that want to get to, read and write and arithmetic, and that's all that matters. Like, they're missing the plot on, again, if your kid is not healthy, or feels safe, they're not going to learn. They're not going to learn. Kids do not learn when they don't feel safe, or respected, or healthy. Study
having
after
your
study
basic
after
needs
study.
met.
Yeah, study after study
having
after
your
study
basic
shows
needs
this.
met. You've got to have that first before you can learn.
Yeah. So one question that I always kind of have thought about for a long time. So my daughter lives in a different school district than I live in. So I don't get to vote in school board elections, or like my role is different. I know that teachers often live in a different school district, and I'm sure that's kind of a double-edged sword for you, right? Especially as you raise kids too. So you're maybe living in one district and teaching in another, or vice versa. Like, it has to be a challenge for you guys, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. So when we lived in Marshalltown for 21 years, and our oldest two graduated from Marshalltown High School. We're both from Ankeny, and just due to a few things that went on, we decided to move down here, and our youngest went to Centennial. But I think if I went through, there are a lot of people that don't live in the district that they teach in. And even my daughter-in-law, although it's a little bit different with Des Moines, because they live in Waukee and she teaches in Des Moines, that's a little bit different. But it is different to teach in a different district than you live in, for sure. And like I said, we were there for 21 years. But I don't know. I sometimes enjoy it because I come here and I'm here. I'm not, especially now.
There's a level of detachment that you have, maybe.
Yeah, I can decompress a little bit. I don't go to the stores and see my kids, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But I did it for 21 years when my oldest two, our youngest left there when he was after his freshman year. But yeah, you just kind of come here and it's just you feel like you're Shelly, whereas there you're Mrs. Kluver. And now I just need to be Shelly more than any time before. So for me, I kind of like it. Yeah.
Or probably helps avoid those awkward times, like the time that my wife was at the grocery store buying beer after a hard Friday, and she turned around and her student and her parents were right behind her.
I remember the first.
I was just kind of then just trying to shield all the alcohol from what I was buying from the parents, and I didn't have the hard time. It was because of their kid.
Well, because the kids think we live there.
Yeah,
they think we live at the school.
Yeah,
right.
But
Exactly.
there also has to be times where, I have my own problems with my kids' school board, because the school board members do not seem to represent anything that the teachers and administrators care about, right? There has to be some times where you have to feel doubly frustrated because you don't even get a vote in who those school board members are.
No, I don't. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't now. I think I just, it's such a cluster right now.
Yeah.
That I just think that we're all going in so many different directions. Nobody can agree on anything. You can't get a majority. I just think everything is, like I said, we all just kind of have our own opinion and I'm right. And so, it's, I sometimes don't even want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
You know,
that makes sense.
Yeah. I deal enough with, and not just me, but all teachers deal enough with all those decision-making things that you do all day long and the things that you're trying to do that you feel is right and that you've taught or your philosophies and then to try to battle with a school board or try to battle with something else. It's just not, I just don't have it in me. And so sometimes that's kind of nice for me right now.
Again, that sort of that separation
yeah.
Right. No, I think that's huge. There's certainly that balance between you want to be community connected, right?
Yeah.
Because you are going to be a part of that and you want to make sure. And I think the school cares a lot about that. I know my kid's school talks a lot about being a part of the community.
Yes.
But I also know that my daughter's favorite specialist teacher, the music teacher, lives like 45 minutes away. And I do not blame him by any means. And I'm sure he very much appreciates his drive home and his ability to decompress and think about something different.
And to her, he's her teacher.
Yeah.
Whether he lives here or there, 5 minutes away. And that's just, and to the kids, what they think and how they feel, that's what I care about. Yeah. And they don't even understand really, to be honest, how far away I do live or what I do. To them, it's just, they just know that when they show up at 8 o'clock, Mrs. Kluver's there.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what's important.
Community connected might mean something in a town where I grew up in, where my graduating class was 69 students, but like where my daughter is, where there's, 500 students per graduating class, you don't even see your own classmates outside of school.
Right.
Like, does it matter if your parents are connected?
Yeah, not like you used to.
Yeah,
no, right,
it's definitely different for sure.
It's definitely, yes, for sure.
One of the comments that I had yesterday in the conversation I have, which the question I'll ask you will lead to a nice question, but the comment was basically, not all teachers are truly invested, and how many of those teachers are in it just for a paycheck? Well, we can, we can laugh about that joke because that's clearly a joke.
Right.
But why don't you tell me what you love about teaching? What do you love about it?
I love the impact that I can have on kids. I think the best thing in the entire world is that when you have kids come back, when you have kids send you emails, when you have kids write you a letter, and 5 years, 6 years, they've graduated, and just let you know what kind of an impact that you had on them. And at the time, you don't realize you're doing that. But I think that just being there for them, I could have gotten a job here, but I felt like my heart was where I am now. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like I could do more good there. And I just think making an impact on kids' lives and making them better people. And like I said, academics, that'll come. I just want to make them better people.
That's a great answer. My daughter, when she was very little, when I first met my wife, I was divorced. I had 2 girls who, no, I'm not talking about you. You can go away.
Okay.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hello.
When I met my wife, she was teaching at a school, which was actually right around the corner from my house. But at the time, my girls were not going to that school. And after we were dating for a while, she had suggested that maybe I start sending Caitlin to her school because it was right around the corner. So I open enrolled Caitlin into that school. For as long as I can remember, Caitlin has always been good with kids. She's always loved kids, and she's always wanted to teach. So she said at one point, she said, "Wouldn't it be neat, Dad, if I could go back and teach at my old elementary school and show those kids that I was where you were at one time, and that if I was able to go to college and get a good job and so on, and show those kids that it's possible for somebody from their own neighborhood and that tiny little school to do something like that." And I just thought that was a profound reason why to go into a profession like that.
And she never said, I want them to be able to add or subtract or read. She said, I want them to show them what they can do and what they can make of themselves. And that is, for me, the basis, the whole reason for teaching.
Right.
I mean, honestly, when you think just in general of the most successful people in life, or the most successful people that you know, and we'll ask you a question about success, I think, at the end of this podcast, but it's not the people who got the best grades or learned the
right.
How to get the most A's. It's the people that learned the best skills.
Exactly.
Right. And that skills doesn't mean passing every test. It means managing life.
Yep. And I think, I've really tried this year to instill in my kids, my students, that the awards, I'm trying to get them to understand the internal drive, or the intrinsic success, and how that feels good. So now I'm trying to, if somebody gets to a level that they want to get on whatever they're working on, I'll say, doesn't that feel good inside? We try to make that so that it's not, well, what do I get for that? What do I'm kind of wore out with that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Of, we've got to get kids back to be intrinsically driven and not extrinsically.
Not just rewards based. Yeah.
I need a reward. and I'm old school too when it comes to some of that. That's just not how I worked. These are the expectations. I don't reward you. I saw something the other day on, you should reward kids for coming to school every day. In some cases, there is a battle for some of them to get there.
Yeah.
But I tell mine at the beginning of the year that I look at 25 faces, and you're all my kids. I don't care your race, your color, who you live with, grandma, aunt, and uncle, whatever. When you walk in my room, you're my students, and the expectations are the same. And we're trying to get them to understand that they want to feel good about themselves, not that I got, a sticker or something. So I'm working really hard this year on that.
So, we talked briefly at the top about, you spending time in Texas, and maybe the motivation for a lot of those students to be a lot more sports oriented. Right. And so there is kind of this non-traditional academic piece that I do think has a significant value in kids' development. Right. And you kind of have a special insight on this with your son as a former Division I athlete, right? That there are other aspects to learning and development that I think the school system provides. It is definitely a balance, though, right?
Yes, for sure. So my oldest, now understand that Todd, my husband, coached my boys growing up. He coached football and basketball. There's Tyler played at the University of Iowa as a long snapper. He's not your 6'2", 6'3" great athlete coming out of high school. But boy, did sports teach him a lot. And I don't know, he's not the best athlete, but boy, he worked hard. And that taught him to work hard. And Chris, or Tim, either one of you, I don't know if you guys knew of Chris Doyle at Iowa. Mm-hmm. Tyler absolutely just loves him. And obviously he's not there anymore.
Yep.
Chris was old school. And like, there's opinions all over about what happened with that. But Tyler is an epitome of hard work. He's a type A personality. Who thought a pudgy 5'10" kid was going to go play Division I sports? But growing up, that teaches you teamwork. It teaches you, how to work together. There's so much that goes. I played sports since I was 5. I was out with the boys all playing, I went to college and played softball. So sports has just been a huge part of our life. And it's just, and it doesn't have to be, it could be dance, it could be cheerleading. It could be, anything that they choose, but that gives another aspect for kids to learn these things that they're lacking.
Yeah. So my nephews went to school at Centennial. My oldest nephew, so the challenge was because he would take some classes at home with my sister and some classes at school, but he ran cross country and he lettered and he went to state. He was a state cross country and the high school was all but excited to claim him as a Centennial student when he was running cross country, but not when it came time to graduate and allowing him to walk with his classmates.
Because he was homeschooled?
And only partially homeschooled. He took classes at the high school, but because he didn't take, I don't know if it was a requisite number or whatever it was, they were all very happy to say, hey, look at our state cross country runner, but no, you don't get to walk across the stage when you finish your 4 years. And so, wow. Yeah, that's certainly a something that has rubbed me the wrong way for a long time.
Absolutely.
Because to me, it's like that, like you said, like what schools have to offer. Like the reason we have athletic programs at schools is because schools are filling a role that's greater than just teaching them to read.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're going to have all of those things, I think, those kids are committed to that school too. And so it was frustrating to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sort of a tangent.
I've never heard of such a thing, to be honest with you.
It was
only homeschooled, but not when they were partial like that. I hadn't heard that either.
It was incredibly frustrating. My sister and her husband handled it with great aplomb, and my nephew, water off a duck's back.
Sure.
But to me, that kind of highlighted where like sometimes communities or school districts or whatever can run kind of counter to the mission, because again, the idea is we're creating these complete humans that, the idea is once they graduate, then we're unleashing them on the world.
Right.
Despite or because of their parents' involvement, despite or whatever, but that's, you invest all this time in your students to unleash them.
Right.
The next level, right?
And I think that some districts, this is my opinion, I think some districts see things differently than others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're more successful athletically may see that as at a different level than maybe some of the schools that are not as successful athletically. And that, that's wrong. And I'm kind of shocked about that, Tim. That's just running through my head now that I can't even think that I would be irate. And I would want to reason. And I just don't, what does that send? What message does that send?
Right.
I don't get it. Like, even if he was 100% homeschooled, then why did you take credit for all of his athletic success?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And he wasn't 100% homeschooled, which makes it even worse. Because I want this to be a complete thing. So yeah, it's been a touchy thing for me. And like I said, my nephew is at Iowa State now, and that's long been forgotten for him. He does not care, but for me, it's still just a frustrating thing because I come from a family of educators, and I know that the teachers care about creating complete humans.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's funny that you said that he's kind of let it go, because kids, it seems to roll off their backs a lot easier than it does the adults when things like that happen. And like I said, what message does that send? And I'm a huge sports person, huge, but that sports comes to an end for everybody at some point in time. And then you got to go be a person. You got to go be LeBron James someday. That's going to end. I mean, that's going to end for everybody at some point. And then you got to have something else in life. Tom Brady at 44 just retired. That's still way too long, but that's still way young from a real life standpoint. Right.
For
and now he has to figure out who he is after the fact.
Which I think is an important aspect of what some of these football coaches are teaching when those kids are in that program. We've talked a lot. Tim and I have had guests on and talked a lot about Matt Campbell and his philosophy and his program and so on. I would love to hear your perspective on Kirk Ferentz, because I think he's another man that takes pride in raising young men into upstanding, good people that try to be good husbands and good fathers and things like that. We don't get to hear much about that. So why don't you talk a little bit about what Kirk maybe was to Tyler and from your perspective?
Well, and the connection to Coach Ferentz goes way back, because when Todd graduated from Ankeny, obviously there was only one school at that time. He went to Iowa, and he played under Hayden Fry for 2 years. Coach Ferentz was there, Coach McCarney was there, Bob Stoops was there, I believe. So all of those were there when Todd was there for 2 years. And then at that point, he was behind Bob Cratch, who would go on to be an NFL lineman. And so Todd decided that, obviously you look and see, I'm also 6 foot and I'm not going anywhere. And he ended up at Iowa State. And so we've known Coach Ferentz for a long time. He is what you see on the camera. He is what people say he is. And his true, goal in life is to raise good young men that are going to be better, because he knows that football will end for the majority of them. When you look at who goes on to the NFL every year, that's not many in any colleges. And I do feel like
football's going to end for all of them.
Everybody. Right. Yeah. Like Tyler lived with Josie Jewell, lived with Ike Butker, it will end. Ike got hurt. Who knows what happens.
Yeah.
And Kirk doesn't forget a face. He doesn't forget a name. He's very tied to giving money to the hospital. His wife, Mary, is phenomenal. I feel like Coach Campbell is the same way. I feel like he looks at the kid and what they're going to be when they graduate or move on in life. And then we look at the football players. Now, is football important in winning? Absolutely. Because in Kirk's situation, I don't know if he's going to ever get fired, but they fire people left and right. You're not secure, but I wouldn't have wanted Tyler to play for anybody else. Not at all. He had the best 5 years of his life there. A lot of discipline he learned. He had to, he was called a, white, pudgy little fat kid. And over here,
Chris is still called that.
Yeah.
Only it's not a kid.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a poster up in my room that says "Adversity breeds character," and he learned a lot, and it just made him better. He was going to battle and just become a better person. He was, even if against all odds, and he did it.
And he's turned into a nice little side a nice little. I think he's a fitness trainer and his podcast and some of his merchandise and so on. He's done really well for himself.
Yeah, his passion is fitness. Like he's going to do the CrossFit whatever in a few weeks. I can't keep up with everything that he does, but that was really his passion. He does personal train. I think he's got like 14 clients right now, and he's got some from around the country that he trains. That, and then the podcast thing just kind of came from we call them the Benton Street Boys, because they all lived on Benton Street. And so it was Ike and Josie and Drake and all of them lived together. That just came out of a text message a few years ago when they graduated. What if we got on the radio, or what if we put a podcast together and talked about football? So he's done well for himself. Yeah. So he's made, so that's his degree is in exercise science, and he does podcasts. So you never know where you're going to end up, right?
When he said he was going to get a degree in exercise science, you didn't roll your eyes, because my dad did when I tried to do leisure studies. I tried to transfer to leisure studies in my.
No. His degree has science in it. Yours just had leisure in it.
Leisure in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Famous words. I'm not paying $2,500 a semester for you to be leisure. You can do that for free at home.
Exactly. Yeah. No kidding. He started getting into CrossFit when he was about 16, and just kind of has had an obsession with it. And Coach Doyle used to always make fun of him and go, "Yeah, Kluver, you're CrossFit, whatever." Because that kind of conflicts with the weight room. They don't do the same thing, so that he always got made fun of. But he's gotten his nutrition certificate as well. He's big into health, so I'm not always happy when he comes here, because he's like, you shouldn't eat this, you got to eat this, take this, drink this, don't drink this. And, so we're not always excited when he comes, because then we hear all that. But yeah.
I was going to say, like you said, that he's into podcast and fitness, which is very much like Chris and I, we're into podcast and fatness. So it's very much very similar.
But drinking on this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think you will ever be judged for what you eat around either Chris. No.
Well, not so much with Tyler, but that's okay. He's pretty good about just letting us be, but we always get some kind of lesson when he comes over. Like I now just got some magnesium in the mail that I'm going to be taking, because he said that's good for you. So
do you think this is punishment for him growing up as the child of two teachers, that he's actually turning around and trying to teach you guys something?
Probably. Yeah, probably. It probably is. So, but that's okay. We're very proud of him. We're obviously proud of all of our kids.
Sure.
But yeah, when I'm on a podcast right now and talking about sports, then he does come up. So yeah.
Good. Well, no, you'll have to let him know that he's not the only podcaster in the family.
I told him, and I think he was a little jealous, like, why do you get to go on one? I'm the one that's supposed to be the podcaster, and now you're going on one. And I said, I sure am.
My dad, he's retired, and he was on Twitter for the longest time, and he had more followers than me on Twitter.
Oh gosh.
And I didn't want to say I was ever jealous, but I was jealous of him. And I can say that because I'm fairly certain he doesn't know how to listen to this podcast, but he could still own me on that game. Yeah. So you'll have to make sure.
Yeah, Tyler and I
Twitter account.
Tyler and I have gone back and forth, bantered back and forth when their flags came out. Hawks by a million flags. Yeah. I didn't have one. Like, I never had one, and I would just go back and forth with him. He finally said, "Mom, you're gonna get a flag. Stop it." And I just like to give him crap,
Right? Yeah, you don't really want it, because then there goes the argument. That's no fun.
Exactly. So now it's sitting downstairs, and now so.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how old or successful he ever gets. You're still his mom. He needs to recognize that, he's gonna be put in his place no matter what.
Right. Yeah, there's times when I'll say, you're not here without me. So
those sound like familiar conversations.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I've heard that from my mother too.
Yes.
Shelly, we've taken up quite a bit of your time. Chris, is there anything else you kind of wanted to cover?
No, I was just gonna say, if you're anything like my wife, we're probably well past your bedtime.
Yeah, I was gonna message you, Chris, and be like, now how long is this gonna take? Because I try to go to bed at 9
Yeah.
so that I can function the next day. But no, we're good. This has been fun. I've enjoyed it.
I'll never forget the first time I was at Stacy's house. We were dating, and it was probably like 8:45, and she's like, so you need to go home. And I was like, what? I was like, why? She's like, I got to go to bed.
Yeah.
I was like, it's 8:45. She's like, yeah, I know. Listen, if you're going to be around me, you're just going to have to figure it out. That's my schedule. And that first week that school comes back, man, it's like brutal. It's brutal.
Brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Yep. It is.
Yesterday, I used to drive in and just take her coffee every time for conferences to get her through for the rest of the night. But I didn't yesterday, and I heard about it. So.
Well, once you start that though, Chris, you've got to keep that up.
Well, I was trying to get her to like me at the beginning. Now we're married. Those days are over.
Oh.
We just need our peace.
So once again, side note to all of our listeners, this is yet again reasons why you should not listen to Chris for relationship advice.
I don't know. No, I do not have anything else other than my appreciation and thank you for coming on. It's been fun.
Yep.
And I appreciate your perspective quite a bit. So
I hope I didn't make anybody mad out there.
That would be fine. It wouldn't be the first time we made somebody mad on this podcast.
Well,
Tim does it.
Yeah, I know it's you, but still, no, I appreciate your honesty. It's always good to kind of have a forthright conversation about this because we're living in tricky times.
We are, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, right. I think that's the thing that I haven't yet lost hope. 3 years is a long time, but it's not. It's a blip in everything else, right? So we will.
And I think the thing for teachers is, even though it's hard, and even though it's been long, those kids still come every day, and we still have to send them on to the next grade and on to the next grade. So we still have to go in and try to get them to do this, even though we're in these tough times. And so one thing that I think the last thing that I would say is that I'm never going to give up on kids. And I tell them at school, you're going to talk yourself till the 180th day of school. I'm not going to give up on trying to get you to do the things that I expect. So
I think that is absolutely perfect words to end on. Boy, I certainly appreciate that, and I would be honored if you were my daughter's teacher. So
thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelly, for coming on.
Yeah.
Listeners, once again, this has been Old Man Strength, a podcast of the Tailgate Society and brought to you by Revelton Distillery. If you are available, Chris, what is the date and time exactly? It's on my calendar, but I don't have my calendar in front of me.
February 19th. February 19th from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. We're going to do a live recording of Old Man Strength in the Revelton Distillery. So we invite everybody. Shelly and your husband Todd are welcome to come down. We'll have some drinks, hop on the podcast. We'll be able to see how short Tim really is.
Very.
We can get you a booster seat when we're down there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And hop on the pod and tell us what you think. Make fun of us. I may or may not have some old friends coming down that are willing to tell some stories. So be a good time. Tim will even have some of our mutual friends. Shelly, Tim and I have mutual friends that know us both, but yet Tim and I have never met.
That I know, and that's crazy that I got on here and you said you guys have never met. That's crazy.
Speaking of which, Tim, shout out to Josh Toby. He just got hired here in Norwalk as the athletics director here.
Did he? I haven't even talked to him about that. Well, good for him, Toby. I'll shoot you a text. Well, you'll get the text message before this comes out. Well, I don't know. Chris edits these fast, and I'm slow at text messaging people. But good for you, Josh. That's awesome. We started out the podcast making fun of people who think that we knew someone from Iowa State because there's 30,000 people, and it turns out Chris and I have like a billion people in common anyway. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, once again, this has been Old Man Strength. Please check out all of the great content on the Tailgate Society at thetailgatesociety.com. Please check out all of the podcasts of the Tailgate Society Network. And with that, we will see you guys next time.
I don't want to get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours, terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can. And we'll all join in to that original sin.